First, just a very special thank you to all who have supported me since the beginning of the journey of just shining a light on difficult things, on hard answers. Thank you so much for doing that. This is for you. 10 years ago when my daughter died in a car crash, I made myself a promise. I promised that I would do a couple of things very specifically. One is that I would, everything I did and talked about through what I've learned, I would honor my other 3 kids, and I really hope I've done that. Thanks in advance for joining us. I hope you enjoy this next conversation. I'm Matt Logan, the host of This Matters in Real Life. Oh hey, stay tuned at the end of this. I'll give you some more information.
Hey, welcome everybody. We are going to talk about election security. Wait and see, or should we actually do something about it? Talk about it, look into it, figure it out. We are back here again today. We're changing the name, Craig.
All right, we're going to be calling it Craig?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for being here again, man.
Hey, it's good to be back.
I was thinking about it, and I was reading a lot of the comments that we had over the course of the first 4 episodes that we did. And a lot of the comments said they were happy that we were real people talking about real things that affect like working class lives, right? And so we're switching it to This Matters in Real Life. You okay with that?
Absolutely.
What? Okay. Do you have a say in it?
No.
Okay. So Mike, we're going to talk about this election security thing. Do we wait and see what happens?
Absolutely not.
Tell us who you are.
My name is Mike Marti. I'm a Casson area resident, lived there all my life, 4th generation Minnesotan, small business owner, and a former gubernatorial candidate for the Republican Party in Minnesota. And that's my life in a snapshot. My wife Nicole and I have 4 children, and we just want to see Minnesota move on a better path.
You know, I chose not to put in some of my research, we had some issues in Minnesota. I don't know if you noticed that, because I sent each of you guys what I had read. And I chose not to put it into my personal research because I knew a lot about it already. So hopefully we'll be able to talk about it, even though that I didn't put it in there.
Sure.
But right here in Minnesota, there was, I guess it would be considered ballot harvesting, because somebody was going around collecting mail-in ballots and bringing them to the polls, essentially. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was going on. And then, of course, the standard ballot harvesting that happens all the time in the nursing homes and places like that, where people will go in and essentially get people to vote in a particular way. And that's obviously skewing the election, which is not good.
Right. Which would, what's interesting to me in reading a lot of this is the way things are framed, right? The way we use words to frame an idea or a statement or any of the different processes that, well, you do as a small business, the way you frame things to your, I'm assuming you have employees?
Yep.
So the way you frame to your employees would be very important to the work you're doing, the job you're doing, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's important that they understand what they need to do and what the outcome has to be.
So if you frame a sentence or a paragraph on what they're supposed to do, and they do it completely differently than the way that was framed, that's kind of like a miscommunication, or is it an outright, like, just straight lie?
Well, it's just it's going off of what the parameters are supposed to be, where the outcome is supposed to end up.
Yeah.
But we had a Secretary of State. I'm assuming you're kind of going down that path, where the Secretary of State just kind of took it upon himself to change the rules because of a pandemic.
Right.
And we can't do that.
It's not constitutional according to the United States Constitution and the Minnesota Constitution, is what I've looked into and read. Craig, did you see any of this stuff out of Pennsylvania and Arizona and stuff that's come out literally in Georgia in the last few days?
I did. I went through those this week, and of course you're never going to see that stuff in mainstream media because it doesn't fit the agenda. But it's, people say, well, there's no voter fraud, and pull your head out of the sand. Do a little research, turn off mainstream media. As far as the ballot harvesting, my understanding is it's legal in Minnesota. It's not legal in Pennsylvania, or is it Georgia that's not legal?
Georgia, it's not legal. Pennsylvania, they, according to what I recall, they were trying to, the way the framing was it was a little bit mucky. And then the judge said, no, this wasn't legal. But it did, they did say, however, that those circumstances for the mail-in or not going to the polls in person, those circumstances include being out of town on business, illness, physical disability, election day duties, or religious observance. And that has nothing to do with pandemic. It has nothing to do. And so they tried to change all those things, including in Minnesota, as Mike had said. And so I've got to read this. This is out of an article from the AP, and the way they frame this, and I read it, and I'm like, it's an interesting way to frame it because they actually were very opinionated, and I thought the Associated Press was not supposed to. They're supposed to state the facts, right? But I was reading this, and it made me believe that this was going a certain way. So I had to dig into it a little bit more. But here's what one of the lines that they had said. Just over 2.5 million people voted under the law's expansion of mail-in voting in 2020's presidential election, most of them Democrats, out of 6.9 million total votes cast. Now that's very interesting because the way that's framed, it says under the law's expansion of mail-in voting. Well, it wasn't a law.
Correct.
The law was not. Well, how do we make laws?
Usually we have a legislature that votes on them and a governor that passes them. They weren't doing that then. It was a single person taking it upon himself or herself to just make up rules as we went.
We have a voting system to make laws?
Yeah.
It sure didn't look that way in the recent years,
Yeah,
is it?
yeah, it's called a representative form of government that we haven't been actually using enough.
And these things are so important in real life. I have grandkids, my kids are grown, and I'm looking at some of these things, and I get banned on Facebook, or they tried to ban me, I should say, on Facebook recently, and I'm like, why? They won't even tell you, right? And so I push on them and lean into it, and they're like, well, okay, since you leaned into it, we won't ban you. That's essentially what it was, but they wouldn't tell me why. Their community guidelines were violated by my page, right?
Right.
And so it's like they won't tell you and they won't tell you, and it feels like that's what's happening in the government. They're doing all these shadow campaigns almost, trying to pass these things along when they're mandates. A mandate is very different than a law.
Correct.
What do we do?
Well, number one, we have to elect a Secretary of State who will follow the law. That's very important. And I know of one candidate in particular who I support, and we're not going to get into who that is at this point, but it's very important that we have someone who will follow the law as written. And then if something comes up where we have to change because of certain circumstances, it has to be done properly. And that way the law is applied equally to everyone. And then on top of that, besides just following the law, we have to have voter ID. We have to have some way of ensuring that the people who are actually voting are actually that person. And I think that's paramount in all of this.
Why do you think we should have voter ID? That gets talked about a lot. A lot of people say it's racist.
Well, it's odd because nobody calls it racist when you have to have an ID to go open a checking account or to drive a car or any other thing that you use that same photo ID for. There's really no racial component whatsoever. It's just the standard argument that they want to use to try to debunk a good idea.
I've seen a really cool video, and they were talking about voter ID and how it's racist and whatnot. And they went to a neighborhood in New York City that back in the day was very black. Harlem is where they went, and they talked to all these people on the street, and they're like, "Well, do you know where the DMV is to go get your ID?" And every person they talked to said, "Yeah, it's 3 blocks this way, 1 block to the left." So how it's difficult for anybody to go get a state ID, and how that is a racist thing, I don't get it.
Yeah, I saw.
You have to have a state ID for everything.
Right. I saw a different video too. I'm assuming it was a different video because I don't remember that exact thing. But they're like, we have to give an ID for prescriptions that we go get.
Right.
Like you have to give an ID for just about anything. Cigarettes, alcohol. I mean, the whole list went on this video that I saw. And they're like, we have to do that.
Right.
It's part of living in our country.
Right.
And to follow the rules and the laws of our country, you have to have an ID to prove who you are. So interesting that you brought this up.
Let me stop you a second.
Yep.
I just thought of something that happened quite a long time ago. I live in a small township, right? Mm-hmm. And in the country here, and not everybody, but a lot of people, you know each other or of each other, right? And so I go in to vote, and this happens in a little precinct, and you know how small that precinct is personally.
Right.
And so, and I'm pointing to Mike, so Mike knows that precinct, and it's very small, and most of the people at this point, they know who I am because of the tragedy that had happened, and everybody in the community rallied. And so I go in there, and they're like, you got to go to the sheet and sign and all that kind of stuff. You know how it works. So I go there. I'm like, that's not me. Someone had signed, and they voted for me.
Right.
In this small community. And they're like, so they finally figured it out, tracked it all down, and said, oh, yeah, we know, blah, blah, blah. And they fixed it, and they figured it out. But that's how easy that is to do.
Right.
Because I don't have to go in there and show an ID. So someone voted in my stead. That wasn't me. It wasn't a family member. And they were like, boom, here, I'm going to do it. In a small district like that.
Probably a ledger of like 200 or 300 names.
Right.
As opposed to my ward, my precinct and ward where I voted in Rochester was probably, 800, 1,000 names. So
yeah, it's really backwards. It's really interesting. They just in the Georgia Secretary of State, he or she, I can't remember. I don't have the name written down, but they had praised the Democrats for withstanding pressure from the president. Right? Kemp Kemp's the governor of Georgia,
the governor, yes.
Right? So Kemp obviously endorsed everything and things, but they actually have now this, according to the complaint filed with the Secretary of State of Georgia on November 30th of 2021, at least 242 people made over 5,000 ballot drop-offs during the Georgia Senate runoff elections. That's just the Senate runoff elections.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that brings us to a whole nother idea, is the drop-off boxes, largely funded by your friend, Mr. Zuckerberg, who financed all of these drop boxes all over the country.
How did you know that he emailed me that stuff? I thought that...
he ran it past you, right?
But it breaks the entire chain of custody in that ballot, making that ballot literally invalid at that point.
Right.
Why would anybody want to do that with their vote? Your vote's too important to do that with.
Here's the thing that most people don't understand from my perspective when I talk to them. They think that this is a Republican issue. They think that, I'm like,
right.
No. Wait a minute. I remember the election of 2000,
Right.
I remember, that whole, and for those of you watching or listening, that was Al Gore and George W. Bush and hanging Chads.
Right.
And, it's been part of our history. And so I think it's so important that we get it right. It doesn't matter the party.
No.
It doesn't matter.
No, this isn't about finding a certain outcome. This is about making sure that people's votes are counted. Every legitimate vote is counted, and every not legitimate vote is not counted. That's just basic American principles there.
If you're not worried about election fraud, then let it be investigated thoroughly and properly. So, and I want to touch back on the ballot harvesting, and I understand the principle behind going to nursing homes to be able to get ballots for their patients that aren't able to go out to the election areas. But just to have some Joe Blow off the street go and collect those, that's where I have a problem. I am absolutely fine with helping those people that can't get to the tolls vote.
Right. Chain of custody is what it sounds like you're saying.
Yes. Why don't they have 2 election officials go to those nursing homes to pick up those ballots? Why is it just you or me or anybody off the street can go pick up ballots? That's a problem.
Well, and the other issue there also, besides just the chain of custody, is are these people, who may not be, who are impressionable, we'll say, easily swayed one way or the other.
Absolutely.
Are they being swayed a certain way? That's why it's so important that if you have someone, a loved one living in one of these facilities, that you actually, are there while they're voting. Have somebody there.
Here's
while
how
they're
easy
voting.
that is, like you say, too. And I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think this is a crucial piece to connect it. I just heard of somebody that gave away $30,000 or near $30,000, fraudulent people, sent them a message, said, hey, we need you to do this because X, Y, Z, and they did it because they're that impressionable.
Right.
$30,000. How easy would it be to impress upon them who they should vote for if they were, and we hear about that all the time.
All the time.
Thousands of dollars. Right. And these people have a really special place in hell, if you ask me. And they, to lean into an elderly person like that and steal their hard-earned money is ridiculously
right.
I'm
Evil.
not going to go there anymore.
Yep.
But it's extremely easy for them to be impressed on who they should vote for.
Absolutely.
Can I add one thing to this? And I haven't seen this on any other videos. I haven't seen it in newsprint, but it's been on my mind. And we haven't talked about this for 2 months, but with COVID and the COVID vaccine IDs and all this jazz, why is it so difficult for our government to track the people that vote? Every U.S. citizen has a social security number. They know everybody that has tested for COVID, that has been positive or negative. I was tested a month ago, and within days, the Minnesota Department of Health was contacting me, but they had my cell phone. I didn't give it to anybody. They know what everybody is doing. Our credit card companies have been tracking us for decades. They don't have to rewrite programs to be able to track who has voted and who hasn't voted. This isn't rocket surgery to figure this out, to basically use your social security number or whatever it is to track that everybody votes once. Make sure that everybody is alive that has voted and legal.
Yeah, we do need to definitely go through the voter rolls, maintain the voter rolls, and make sure that, the people that are on the voter rolls are actually live in that district.
They literally came out and said New York has millions that have moved and have died that are still on the voting rolls.
It wouldn't surprise me a bit. Even our small precinct, I'm just next to you basically, and I was an election judge in the last 2 elections, and there's all kinds of people on the voter rolls that are no longer with us. Well, we need to clean that up. But then, the issue of tracking people, I do, that's a rabbit hole that I wouldn't want to go down necessarily. It's good to know who voted, or I should say whether that person is actually the person that's voting. But we do need to make sure that our ballots remain anonymous. We need to maintain that privacy. So that would be my fear with that.
Absolutely. And just have they voted, sense. Yes or no? And that's all that should ever be on it. Doesn't matter RDI, whatever. Yes or no.
Yep.
That's all that should be there.
And then, so if I could just also plug another thing, and that is election judging that I just talked about a little bit. Yeah, there's 2 sides to election judging. You have the Republican side and the Democrat side, and each precinct is supposed to have an equal number at each poll. The problem is when you get into these large inner cities, they're very heavily Democrat, and they don't get Republican poll judges there or election judges there. And I'm going to be a little bit partisan here because I'm a Republican. Okay, so that's we
can
where
be
I come
partisan
from.
here. Totally,
so,
that's not what it's about.
So the problem here is in the last election, Minnesota had 3,000 Republican election judges and 20,000 Democrat election judges.
No kidding.
Wow.
We were outnumbered 7-1. And when you go into those large inner city precincts, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because there aren't any Republican people watching over those polls.
And that's why no matter the party, you don't wait and see what happens, because you have something that's that skewed. That's stuff's going to happen, plain and simple. Let me say this. Arizona's Secretary of State, who is now running for governor of Arizona, Katie Hobbs, she is a Democrat, according to her own whatever. And now I don't know if she's running under the Democrat ticket or what, but I know that she's been a Democrat in the past, so that full disclosure there. But Maricopa County officials, they have hundreds of the state voting tabulating machines, right? Mm-hmm. That she wants thrown out, destroyed. She's a Democrat. Why does she want them destroyed? Because she said that Republicans, she fears, got a hold of them and are going to do something fraudulent in the next election.
I think that's called the pot calling the kettle black.
Yes.
Good for me.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And so I think it's so important because the mainstream media and everything that everybody hears, Republican, 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 Trump, 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 and it's only coming from one side. Mm-hmm. And if you actually go and look at these places that have had issues, it is not just Republicans.
No.
Republicans have brought it, I think, because of Trump, have brought it more to the forefront. Like Trump or not like Trump, that's not the thing.
Right.
He put a big spotlight on it.
Right.
And a lot of people saw that.
And interestingly enough, over the last week or so, Joe Biden himself has actually laid the groundwork to delegitimize the upcoming election already.
Heard that.
He's already starting to say how it's not going to be a legitimate election, and it's just ridiculous how quickly that flipped.
Because they're so scared that they're going to absolutely lose their asses.
Exactly.
Because people are pissed. They're woke. People have woken. They've woken up and seen what the heck has been going on.
Yeah, right.
And how our country was snowballed a year and a half ago. And I think it's pretty typical that after a major swing or a major election, those off years, off cycles, the majority flips in the House and the Senate. I think that's pretty common.
It's extremely common throughout history. Yeah, absolutely. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think that it's important to not wait and see. I don't think I'm guilty of waiting and seeing way too much on too many things in my life, and it drags you down at some point if you don't do what you need to do to look at it and like you say, it's a partisan issue in the mainstream media.
Right.
It is not a partisan issue for we the people.
No, absolutely not.
So that's my opinion.
If it's not a problem, you shouldn't be scared about it being
super transparent
and making sure that everything is on the up and up.
If you haven't done so yet, hammer the like button, hammer the share button, and make sure that you tell your friends about the podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, we like Spotify.
Anywhere
if you're listening
to
Spotify, give us like 5 stars. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this conversation that I just had. I was very honored to be a part of it, honored to be the host of This Matters in Real Life. I think it's extremely important to cover a lot of different things and topics and get people's opinions. When my daughter died in the car crash 10 years ago, I said that's what I would do. I would look at the answers, I would look at the truth, and I would make sure that they would intersect. They would not divorce each other. It's so often that we want answers that are not the truth. We want answers that are comfortable. We want answers that make us feel good. Well, there's a lot of things in life that it's not the case. So who am I? Well, I am you. I'm no different than you are. I eat and sleep and, all the different things. Same thing that you do. I hurt. I feel joy. I've had a lot of experience, probably just like you. I work hard, probably just like you. One of the things that you can do to support us is go to shinybrandmerch.com, where you'll see things like the sweatshirt that I have on. I'm a full-time, a truck driver. What do I deliver? Well, I deliver trucks. It's a little bit different of a gig than a normal truck driver, yes, but I am what would be considered a commercial vehicle transport specialist. So about 5 to 6 days a week, I deliver trucks. I get into a truck, I go 2,000 miles, I deliver it to its new owner, I get on an airplane and I go find another one. Nothing real glamorous unless you make it that way. And I've decided that I would have a lot of conversations along the way, and some of those conversations I'll be able to share with you. Again, hey, thanks for your support. Appreciate you. We'll see you next time.